Are you ready to create your own elf apron so that you can have a fun elf apron cooking in the kitchen? Well, today, that's what I'm going to do. Hi, I'm Christina, and I love to digitally apparel pattern, and I'm super excited to be making this elf apron today. So if you're interested in joining and sewing along with me, make sure to grab the pattern down below. I have a link to my store where you can get the pattern as well. So let's get started. I decided to use the projector file to cut out this pattern. So first you want to make sure that your projector is sized correctly and all lined up. I use this using the grid. You can check out this video here on how I do this. Then I'm just going to pull my pattern back into frame and I'm going to lay out my fabric. Now, it is always helpful to have somebody else help you lay out your fabric so you can make sure that it's nice and straight on grain and smooth. Then it's time to start cutting this out. One thing to note, that if your computer has a automatic sleep mode, make sure you lengthen that or else it's going to go to sleep on you. I had it go to sleep on me a couple of times, so I need to make sure I change that for the future. The other thing I decided to do is I wanted to actually mark where all the tops of my stitch lines were going to be. And then I just marked out also the stitch line at the bottom hem of all of those little leaf things. That way I would more easily be able to sew them all exactly the way I wanted to. Then all I have to do is cut out the straps and then get out the next color of fabric for the detailing and pockets. And again, I'm going to trace out the stitch line of the detailings of those leaves so I know exactly where I want to sew. And then I'm going to cut out the leaves and pockets. Then I'm going to take them over to my sewing studio and get sewing. I'm going to start by creating all my bits and pieces first and then attaching them. So I'm going to go ahead and pin together my top red detail. And then I'm going to put a safety pin in one end of all of the straps and then fold them in half. That way I can flip them right side out after sewing them really easily. Now it's time to sew. So for this detailing thing, I'm going to make sure to backstitch at the beginning and end and at every point. I like to do this just so it's a little bit more secure. And then up at the top points, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the way up and then turn 90 degrees, do a single stitch and turn and go down the other side. That way when I'm clipping into that point, I have a single stitch length to actually clip into and it will turn much nicer. And I'm just going to repeat that on this one here. And then I'm going to do the same for the hem later on. And now we're going to do the pockets, so I'm just pinning the pockets in for structural. I'm going to leave an opening, so I'm going to sew about an inch up top. I'm going to backstitch at every corner. And then I'm going to clip the corners of all my pockets. Then I can flip it right side out. But before I flip it right side out, I'm actually going to iron the seams open. This will help give it an easier, crisper look once it's already flipped. And the top one, I'm actually going to do both sides so that it's back. Now it's time to flip it out. And I'm going to use the point turner to really get all those corners nice and crisp. One last really good iron. There we go. Now I'm going to trim away and clip into that red detailing. I'm going to trim away so it's down to like about a 1/4 inch all the way around. And all the way around up there. And then I'm going to flip them right side out using that point turner to get a really nice crisp point down at the edge. As I turn, I realize I did not quite actually trim this one all the way down, so I'm going to flip it back out, trim it down really fast, and then finish it. Then I'm going to give this a really nice press. That way it's good to go and it's laying exactly how I want it to go.
Now it looks like that one edge got a little flat on the edge and not all of it got pulled out. So I'm going to wiggle it back out and give it another iron. Now it's time to do the ties. I'm going to sew the short edge next to the safety pin, and then I'm going to turn and I'm going to sew all the way down the long side. Once that's done, I'm going to start working that safety pin out, and it's actually going to flip the entire tie outwards for me as I work it out. This is a really handy way to have it already, you can have a nice crisp edge on the end and turn your finished tie right side out. Then we're going to move over to the ironing board. I'm going to remove that safety pin, and I'm going to put my point turner down into this tie and get those tie corners nice and crisp. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice iron on all of the ties. Now it's time to lay out all my pieces onto the apron. So I'm going to start by laying out the top red detailing, centering it and pinning it down. Then I'm going to add the ties that go right next to it. I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch from the edge because I'm going to do a 5/8 inch and I want an 1/8 inch clearance so I don't accidentally sew over them. I also like to safety pin the extra bits of my ties down so that they're not flailing about inside my project and I don't accidentally sew over them or they get put into a wrong place. That way they're controlled and they're not going where I don't want them to go. Then I'm going to add the waist ties, again 3/4 of an inch away from the top edge, and I safety pin them down, and then I'm just going to pin the entire garment together so that I can do a 5/8 inch stitch all the way around. And I'm just going to make sure to pin all of the different points together so that I know they are all lining up nicely. When I begin sewing, I'm going to make sure to leave at least a 10-inch hole. So I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to do each of those points. Now I'm going to do each of these points very similar to, or the exact same way that I did the red detailing point. So I'm going to go up one side, one stitch over, and down the next. And I'm going to back stitch at all of the points at the bottom to give it a little bit extra security. And I'm going to do that through all of those points. And then we're just going to continue the 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around the rest of the garment. Once we get to about 10 inches away from the first one, we're going to move over to the ironing board. We're going to clip into our corners. We're going to clip into our curves and our corners. And then we're going to trim away that bottom. I'm going to again trim it away to about 1/4 of an inch and trim nice and close up into that point where we have that single stitch to clip into. Now I'm going to press open the seams. This will help make it easier when I flip it inside, right side out, to press them back. This will just give it a little bit of a already pressed crease and it'll be easier in the long run. So I'm just pressing open all the different seams. And then on the side that has the opening, I'm actually pressing back both. That way the closure is already pressed back and I will just need a top stitch. Now I'm going to flip it right side out. I'm going to take those safety pins off so that they don't get caught anywhere anymore. And I'm going to get out my point turner. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go and crisp up all those points right next to the neck ties and the points next to the waist ties. And then I'm going to go and do the hem. But I want to make sure that they're all flipped right side out first. So I'm going to go through and kind of hand flip them all right side out and get them as much in shape as possible. Then I'm just going to grab my point turner and really get those points at the hem nice and crisp. Make sure you don't push too hard because you can push through your fabric with point turners if you're not careful. That's also why I like to do the extra back stitching. Now that I have all those good, I'm going to start ironing this apron flat. Get out all those wrinkles and get it nice and crisp. And then finally, I'm just going to do a top stitch all the way around at about 1/4 inch away from the edge using my sewing foot as a guide. This will help just crisp up the edges and make sure it always looks nice. There we go, clip those threads. Now it's time to put on the pockets. I wanted to have my pockets sewn through both layers so that they were nice and sturdy. If you don't want them sewn through both layers, just make sure you sew them on before you actually combine the two patterns, like when you're putting on the top detailing. I'm going to pin them on. I also noticed that I didn't actually finish sewing the top of the pockets, so I'm going to sew the top of the pockets first so that they are not open. And then I'm going to go ahead and top stitch them really close to that edge all the way around on that pocket. And there we have it. Clip those threads. And let's put it on the form and see how it looks. Ooh, I love it so much. And there we have it. We now have our elf apron completed. He looks so cute in it. I love it. We're ready to bake some Christmas cookies. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe so you can see other fun holiday projects as well as digital apparel patterning. I hope to see you in some of my other videos.